As you can see from a very strong delegation today, we have a keen interest on part of the government of Mexico on any cooperation initiatives for this issue. We just last week sent our informed to the convention on CITES regarding on the efforts that we have doing for protection and vigilance and protection of the Vaquita marina. And we have also recently joined, I don't know if you heard, but on November we also joined the Global Ghost Gear Initiative, also to have a stronger approach on taking out ghost gears from the ocean, and particularly from that region. So we are exploring further cooperation, options and activities, because it is a very large effort that we have to do, and that definitely we need all the support and help that we can get. We do know that from our Ministry of Finance, and that's the reason that they are also joining us today, is that from our star allocation of GEF 7, we have mostly already allocated resources to several different large-scale projects, and that we don't necessarily have that option open. So we were keen on understanding what the global wildlife project program is about, and how those resources are managed. One thing that we have talked about with in an informal setting within our colleagues and with CITES is that mostly GEF programs take long years to prepare and take long years also to implement. And as we all know, this situation is quite urgent. We need all of the resources additional to the government that we can get to pursue, particularly inspection and vigilant programs. So, I mean, that's sort of the interested on these ideas, and on exploring what else we can do together. But we understand that these resources also come from the star allocation. So just understanding what the possibility would be to access, even if it's a separate fund, or just have really realized that it would have to go for the GEF 8 reposition. So we have a lot of questions, specific questions on the programs, but there's definitely the commitment to pursue any further activities. In the previous meeting, which we held in Spanish because a lot of my counterparts from the Mexican government don't speak English, but we had the deputy attorney from Profepa, which is our main institution that is doing those activities, tell us that there is strong interest. And we also have from the Director General of Wildlife, Mari Palma, express their consent. So I don't know, Mari Palma, if you want to add a few words on this topic.
Thank you, Camila. I'm thinking about, the mechanism of the fund. Maybe we have a little doubts and concerns about it. Maybe it's possible to have some more information about it. I don't know, maybe someone can help me about this topic. Thank you.
So Juan Carlos, what I suggest is I'll provide a bit of context for colleagues and how we've done programming in Mexico in GEF 7, and some of the investments that are actually ongoing and reaching a conclusion in that very area dealing with the problem with Vaquita in the Gulf of California. There's actually an ongoing GEF project. And then I will pass it over to Adriana to talk about GWP and Lisa subsequently. So, you know, the GEF operates on an allocation system where at the beginning of each phase, 4-year phase of the GEF, countries know how much money they have to spend in each of the GEF focal areas. And with countries that are quite important in terms of the size of their allocation and their importance for programming in a region, the GEF Secretariat will often undergo very intensive dialogues with the countries to map out the portfolio for any one phase to ensure that we're achieving greater impact with the overall portfolio. And there's always expectations with countries like Mexico that that portfolio planning results in a well thought out set of project investments for any 4-year phase. So for GEF 7, as you rightly pointed out, we undertook such a consultation with many stakeholders over a few days in Mexico City, where we reviewed a series of projects that they had prioritized for submission in GEF 7, and almost all of them have been submitted. In fact, later this week, I'm following up with the newly appointed operational focal point to find out what's the final status of a few outstanding ideas that we had agreed. So that's just to give you a kind of context that at the start of GEF 7, which was now 3 years ago, this issue did not rise as a priority for the country in terms of investment with the STAR allocation. Number one, there were and there are being designed with Conabio in particular some very interesting projects on sustainable use of wildlife, working with local communities around protected areas, existing protected areas. And as I said, there's a UNDP project that's reaching closure that dealt with species conservation throughout the country in various protected areas. And I can share that documentation with you, one of which was dealing with gill nets and the whole interface with Vaquita and Totoaba. I think I'll leave it at that. And now I'll pass it on to Adriana, who can talk a little bit about GWP and how that fits within GEF programming in GEF 7. The Global Wildlife Program is the realization, or how do I put this? Within the biodiversity strategy, we have various points of entry that countries can select. And the Global Wildlife Program has evolved going back since GEF 5, where we started an entry point in the biodiversity strategy dealing with the illegal wildlife trade, focusing on Africa primarily, and it has since evolved into the program we have today as a program that still relies on country-driven projects using the country STAR allocations to support projects dealing with wildlife conservation. So it's much more ambitious than it was at the start. But I'm kind of stepping on Lisa's and Adriana's presentation. So I will hand it off before I talk too much longer. But I really wanted to give you a sense that, one, we had a lengthy consultation with the government at the start of GEF 7, where we identified all the priorities. Two, as Camila mentioned, these have been identified, and the country government agencies and GEF agencies are developing the remaining projects to be submitted in the last year of GEF 7. And three, that this issue some years ago was not raised to the level of priority as it is being right now. Let's just try to give you some historical context for us. So I'll pass it on to Adriana and then Lisa. Thank you.
That was helpful. Thank you.
Let me just interrupt. We have have just Brenda Pequeño, who is joining us. And as I mentioned, this is helpful also for Jeff counterparts, because she will be the newly appointed Director General for International Forums and Green Funds. And so she will be the focal point for all the Jeff portfolio. And so I'm very happy that you can join us, Brenda.
Thank you, Camila. Hi, everyone.
Thank you, Camila and Brenda. Brenda, very nice to meet you. Welcome. And thank you so much for your interest in our program. And as Mark mentioned, wildlife conservation has been part of the GEF investments since the inception of GEF, I would say, you know. But more recently, starting on GEF 6, the issues particularly related to illegal wildlife trade has been organized in a program called the Global Wildlife Program, and focusing initially in Africa on particularly the program spring out of the crisis on the elephant and the ivory trade. And then we've been very successful on that and ever expanding the program. And under GEF 7, we had a very comprehensive expansion of the program. Now we even have projects in Latin America. We have 5 new projects in Latin America, but it's in Asia as well. Very strong set of programs in Asia. It's very important to understand the underpinnings of the program. As Mark mentioned, the program is part of the biodiversity focal area. The program does not have a set aside. Okay, that's very important to understand. It's different from what we call the impact programs that Mexico has assessed through the FOLUR more recently. You have a program with the bank, now the Connecta project that has funds from the set aside for the FOLUR program. The Global Wildlife Program continues to be an entry point under the biodiversity strategy, and it's mainly done through funds from the star allocation of each country. And it's totally voluntary for the programs to join the program. But the Global Wildlife Program has established itself as a leading program globally, particularly for a very strong coordination role that the bank has been playing. Has lots of agencies associated with it, NGOs, and even CITES is part of the steering committee. And we have a very strong focus on knowledge exchanges and also strengthening the capacity of each participant country. We are now preparing a new strategy, as Mark mentioned. The GEF works in 4-year cycle. So we are already starting to prepare the GEF 8, where we are proposing the global program. It's called what we call an integrated program under the new strategy. And it's called Wildlife Conservation for Development, the new wildlife program. So, and it's important to, particularly in the case of that we are discussing today of the Vaquita and the Totoaba issues, is that the new program will encompass aquatic species, marine and freshwater. Because the current program does not, the framework is only for terrestrial species. So the current program, the current GWP program does not include projects with aquatic species, marine and freshwater species. So one of the key elements we want to incorporate in the global program under GEF 8 is exactly this expansion that's making this discussion an interesting discussion in the case why Mexico developed its own strategy for GEF 8 to take into consideration. We're also thinking a lot along the lines of alternative livelihoods and alternative economies exactly to create more alternatives for communities instead of the illegal wildlife trade that has been an issue in many areas. And more recently with the COVID impact, on tourism has been a very strong issue related to this area of wildlife conservation. But I'll stop here. It's just like a general introduction, making very highlighting these important points for our discussion. And I would like Lisa to make a quick presentation on our current program. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Adriana. Thanks, Mark. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Can you give me a screen sharing, Juan Carlos, as the host?
Let me know how to do the, let me check here.
In parallel, I can email you my presentation.
I think I opened that option now for you. Can you try?
Oh, good, let's go. Okay, so hopefully you can share my screen. You can see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. I saw a few thumbs up. So I'll just quickly talk about the Global Wildlife Program. As Adriana mentioned, I'll be kind of looking backwards at the current program. It was great that she gave some remarks on what may happen with GEF 8, but this is focused on the existing program. It's led by the World Bank, so the World Bank takes on the coordination role. It's important to note on the screen the range of partners that are involved, a number of GEF agencies that are supporting the countries that are involved. They work with the GEF agency of their choice, and also international organizations and NGOs, including CITES. In a snapshot of what is the GWP, and I've tried to take your very good questions that you sent through and integrate them into the presentation, so hopefully I answer some of those as we go. So it now has 32 participating countries across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. As Mark and Adriana mentioned, it started just with Africa and Asia in GEF 6, but then under GEF 7, it was open globally, and some countries from Latin America joined. And between those 32 countries, there are actually 37 national projects. And that's because some countries have said, this is a priority issue for us, so we want to submit a project either in GEF 6 and GEF 7, or we want to submit multiple projects within one GEF phase. It's very much country driven. Overall, the investment in GWP is 232 million of GEF, which is supported by 1.3 billion co-financing, which I think makes it one of the largest GEF programmatic investments, but Adriana or Mark will be able to correct on that. If you look at GWP impact across the program, the projects are now working at over 100 protected areas. I think it's more than that now. We're just collating the information from the GEF 7 projects. And over 50 million hectares aiming to come under improved management. And that's both within protected areas and outside of them. As been mentioned, this is all terrestrial at the moment, but that's based on the current projects. And aiming to reach over 500,000 beneficiaries. How does the GWP work? So very much this is driven by country interests. The GWP would not exist if countries weren't interested in allocating their STAR to this issue and using this entry point for their biodiversity allocation. So as been mentioned, countries allocate STAR to a GWP project and they choose to join the GWP. So they work through their national prioritization process, however that works. You need a LOE from the operational focal point to join, and they then work with the GEF agency of their choice. One thing that is different about the program, instead of developing your own GEF and submitting to GEF Secretariat when you're ready, each national project develops a concept note, which is just a simplified GEF, and they're submitted to GEF under a broader umbrella as part of the program. So to date, there's been 4 submissions of the Global Wildlife Program to GEF Secretariat, 2 in GEF 6 and 2 in GEF 7. And they were basically batches of countries that were interested in joining the GWP that was submitted to GEF Secretariat in a timing that suited when projects were ready. So for instance, in GEF 6, there was a big batch initially when the GWP was created that were kind of bundled into the Global Wildlife Program. And then 12 months later, there were more countries interested to join. So there was a second submission to GEF Secretariat, and those countries entered. Same for GEF 7. There were 2 submissions to GEF, again, a first bunch, and then 12 months later, there were more countries that were interested to join. So they were submitted to GEF and added. And they all go as part of this single submission that's done by the World Bank as the lead agency, with all of the national projects appended to the broader program. In GEF 6, there were 20 projects approved in Africa and Asia. In GEF 7, 17 projects joining in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. As well as all of the 37 national projects, there's a global coordination grant, which is led by the World Bank. And that's all about supporting knowledge exchange, learning, and coordination between all of the national projects in the GWP. So this grant is given to the bank to help coordinate and bring all of those national projects together. This is a map showing all of the countries that are currently in the Global Wildlife Program. It's color coordinated by the 2 phases. So those that are shown in the pinky peach color are the ones that were in the initial phase in GEF 6. So these projects are all under implementation now. The countries in purple are the ones in the GEF 7. So some of these have started, but most of them are just going through the final GEF approvals now. And those that are crosshatched are those countries that have multiple projects in GEF 6 and in GEF 7. So I think there's 19 countries in Africa, 10 in Asia, and 3 in Latin America. And importantly, each country is working with the GEF agency of their choice. And you can see the ones that are currently supporting GWP projects on the bottom of the slide. So each GWP project has its own project objective, its own project components, and its own project results framework, but they have to connect up to the broader GWP program framework. And that's what you can see on the screen. And this has changed between GEF 6 and GEF 7. Tried to do a kind of simple way of lining it up. In GEF 6, as Adriana mentioned, the program was in response to, poaching and trafficking of wildlife, particularly looking at the Africa-Asia link. So the GWP framework was around pillars of reducing poaching, reducing trafficking, and reducing demand. In GEF 7, it revised a bit, and particularly there was extra emphasis on how to promote wildlife-based economy and how countries could benefit economically from healthy wildlife populations. And then within this framework, each country chooses, they develop a project that lines up to this based on their own context in IWT supply chains and their own national priorities. So for example, the GWP Thailand project is looking at combating trafficking and demand for IWT products, particularly looking at ivory and tiger. The GWP Mali project is putting a lot of effort into reducing poaching and protecting the Gorma elephants from organized trafficking. GWP Namibia project is looking at tourism to support wildlife-based economy and also looking at human-wildlife conflict. Similarly, in Panama, there's a project there looking at human-jaguar conflict. So each project doesn't have to do all of these things. It lines up to the GWP framework in a way that best suits the country. Most projects would have a flagship species focus. Some of these are shown on the screen. Your key high-profile trafficked IWT species, including jaguar now on the left, with Latin American countries joining. But it's important to note, while most projects have this species focus, of course, they're having broader biodiversity benefits, either through enhancing site-based management or landscape management, or through efforts to strengthen legal and criminal frameworks to combat IWT. GWP knowledge management, this is the work that is funded by the coordination grant that the World Bank gets. And you can see on the screen some of the things that the bank does to bring the projects together. So there's in-person meetings, prior to COVID, in-person meetings, annual conferences to bring all of the projects together and all of the government agencies that are working on these projects, different thematic meetings, whether they're on wildlife-based economy, or human-wildlife conflict, and a study tour. There's actually a study tour to Sri Lanka on human-wildlife conflict, where all of the projects that were interested in human-wildlife conflict mitigation went along on that study tour. And some things also that are available to anyone that's interested in the GWP beyond the participating projects. So for instance, the GWP holds normally monthly webinars. And there have been 57 webinars since 2016. On average, there would be around 70 participants join. We did one last week on conservation livelihoods beyond tourism. I think we had 170 people join. These are open to anyone. So if this is something you're interested in joining now, mailing lists for these type of GWP activities, let us know, we can add your names. Same would be for GWP newsletters that go out, and these share stories from across the GWP, tools or resources that are either coming through the global grant, GWP partners, or through the projects themselves. Part of the coordination is developing knowledge products that either are to support the national projects themselves, such as the two on the left, you can see that are compiling tools and resources for nature-based tourism or to combat illegal wildlife trade. So just a document pulling together, here are all the available tools and resources that you might find helpful, and putting them into one document. Or there's also some global assessments that are completed to help build overall understanding of combating IWT, such as the analysis of international funding to tackle illegal wildlife trade, which all the donors were brought together, originally stemming from a CITES decision, and one on the costs of illegal logging, fishing, and wildlife trade. And this is another thing that the World Bank does as part of its role as coordinating agency. Finally, I just wanted to finish with a reference to the GWP website, which has a lot of this information on it and other resources. So that's all I wanted to do as a quick introduction. Back to you, Juan Carlos.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and thank you to Mark and Adriana for this presentation, collective presentation, which is brilliant. Thank you. I think that this is exactly what the Mexican authorities were looking for, but I will open the floor to you, Camila, and all the different institutions participating in the meeting to ask questions. Just wanted to mention that parties to these multilateral environmental agreements have contracted legally binding obligations, but as important as the obligations are the possibilities for assistance. And I think that that's the effort that we are trying to jointly undertake here, is how we can assist Mexico in the implementation of these different recommendations. What are the opportunities? Some of them are seems to be missed opportunities. But what Camila has said is very important, so that the situation is urgent. So we need to be able to move quickly, and there are strict deadlines under these recommendations. So perhaps now we can open the discussion, and Camila, perhaps you have already some questions and reactions to the interventions from our colleagues from the GEF Secretariat, the World Bank, and the Global Wildlife Program.
Thank you very much, Juan. And yes, this was presentation. This was just information that we needed. Lisa, Adriana, we didn't have a clear picture on how the Global Wildlife Program worked. We were hoping that it was an additional resources beyond our STAR allocation, because as Mark has mentioned, and we all know now, we have mostly sort of allocated already all of the GEF 7 resources. So we would not be in a position to start a project within that portfolio. However, we do see an opening for already start planning for early GEF 8. We see that also the program is being sort of reinforced with different ideas, and maybe we can already put Vaquita marina as one of the flagships species that the Global Wildlife Program could tackle, and also sort of have other countries join our efforts, as we know that illegal trafficking not only depends on the country who hosts the species, but also on the other countries that consume those products and that are part of the problematic that we are facing. So, for example, that could be helpful to have Vaquita marina as one of the flagship species going forward. I mean, we can explore on how we can work with the different partners and I don't know, find that already an agency that will be implementing this program. But definitely we want to have an alliance with CITES, because CITES is also very interested in helping Mexico on fulfilling all of our obligations that we have already quite in mind. As I mentioned, we are presenting every 6 months an update on how we're doing, and we are showing very large improvements in numbers, particularly on inspection and on retrieving those fishing gears. And so we think that, I mean, we can have a strong project going forward. And in that sense, we wanted to explore how could this work for the next repositions in terms of times, because we are concerned here about the critical time and the urgency that we have both Juan and myself mentioned. I don't know if the Global Wildlife Program has a faster track on how the projects and the PIF is presented. I mean, sort of understand what the critical times would be for us to start working as soon as possible, and sort of engage already in technical discussions. I mean, as you mentioned, there are quite a few programs already with Conavio. Conavio is also here on the call, and so we know that those projects are finishing, but maybe we can already start thinking as an extension, focusing on marine protected areas. I'm just thinking out loud here, but keen on understanding on your part what the timing would be for presenting, given that we have almost emptied our GEF 7 resources. And before going back to you, I don't know if anyone from the Mexican government wishes to ask a question from the Ministry of Environment or from the Ministry of Finance.
Yes, I would like to ask something. I cannot raise my hand. My apologies. Can I comment?
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Alejandro, may I ask you to put your camera on? It's just for the recording, because otherwise we don't have a photo or something. That would be good.
Yeah, I have problems turning on my camera. My apologies with using Zoom, the Zoom application. So can I comment or?
Don't worry. Go ahead. No problem.
Thank you. I just let me introduce myself very quickly. I work with Brenda Pequeño at the Ministry of Finance, and as Maestra Cepeda already said, the GEF 7 allocations are almost over, but we still have some resources there. And I was wondering, given that you explained that to join this program, there a PIF and a no objection letter is required from the operational focal point. I would like to ask what has been the average contribution from the start budget for other countries that have joined this program, just to bear in mind, as Maestra Cepeda said, if it will be even possible to consider this program for GEF 7, or if we have to go deep into the details of considering this for GEF 8.
Thank you, Alejandro. I don't know, Maestra Cepeda, if there are other questions or if we can take already your question and Alejandro's question, and perhaps Mark or Lisa or Adriana would like to respond to that. I have a question as well for us to understand, because Mark, you say that the GEF operates in an allocation system, which I think that was made very clear by the presentation as well. But outside this allocation system, is there any possibility of other funds to fill the gap between now and GEF 8, or minor resources available for countries that are developing these proposals, or that doesn't exist at all?
I will answer and try to provide some more context for the colleagues who are new to the Mexico GEF portfolio overall. And then I'll hand it over to Adriana to talk about the species focus within GEF 7. Regardless of the choices the OFP makes with regards to priorities for any remaining resources in GEF 7. So going back to GEF 6, we had discussions with the Mexican government about doing something about the Vaquita. So this is a long history. And it's a very, very complicated problem, as all of you know. And those discussions did not eventuate in a project submission for a variety of reasons that I'm unable to go into great detail here. So this has been on kind of the radar of your predecessors in your positions, who by virtue of my being in the GEF Secretariat for many years, I worked very closely with. Two, the project that I sent to you in the chat from you that is being led by UNDP, which is in its final stages, had species-specific activities throughout protected areas in Mexico. And one of them was focused on the Vaquita and reducing the use of gill nets as a threat reduction strategy. That project is not yet closed. So from a process standpoint within the GEF, we want to understand what is the status of that investment, how much longer will it be implemented, what were the constraints that investment encountered, what prevented it, or what were the enabling conditions that allowed it to achieve the degree of success it did or did not. It's a kind of a mixed bag. I've read the midterm review and it's a bit of a mixed report. And then what would be needed to kind of fill those existing gaps. So this isn't a matter only of where are the available resources. It's what is it that we're going to do to address the problem? How does it build on previous GEF and other investments? What is the baseline investment that the government itself will do to confront these problems? And how will GEF complement that and satisfy our mandate for supporting the incremental costs of any such investment? So before we invest on a particular theme in a particular geography, particularly if we have an ongoing investment reaching closure, we collectively need to understand what did we learn from that investment. So prior to rushing in with more resources, because it's often not an issue of resources, but it's in this particular instance a mixture of political will and behavior change, which necessarily aren't resource intensive. So contextually, I just wanted to let everybody know this is an issue that has come up in the past. We had a small part of an investment from the UNDP project working on species conservation in protected areas. And before we invest more, whether it be regardless of the funding source or the entry point in the biodiversity strategy, we want to make sure we understand the context well, so that continued investment will have a higher likelihood of achieving the impact we're all seeking. So I'll pass it over to Adriana now.
Thank you, Mark. Now, just as a follow-up, Camila, and the question from Alejandro, in relation to the wildlife program, for GEF 7, as I mentioned, aquatic species are not eligible. Okay, so, but under GEF 8, we are proposing this expanded program, including as an impact program. Okay, so that, and I would invite you, because we're currently in the process of consultation of the strategy document. It's available for the countries, and the focal areas is in the GEF website. And I would invite you to read and provide comments, ask questions about it. We are doing it now, the discussion of the GEF 8 strategy. So I think it's a very important moment for you to contribute, and also to, you know, as you build up your country strategy towards GEF 8, you highlight this issue, and you propose within that discussion. The GEF 8 starts in July 1st, 2022. So there is, you know, like a year from now, more or less. So there is, in relation to the timing you asking, Camila, and in response to Alejandro, any GEF project follows the usual structure, and we always have to have the OFP endorsement. Also, you know, there is always the possibility, once we approve the concept of the project, and as I mentioned, under the new proposed structure for GEF 8, we are contemplating marine and freshwater species. There is also the possibility of requesting the project preparation grant. So these are the kind of for preparation of a strong proposal. And if it's to be part of the wildlife program, as Lisa explained, we treat it as a child project within the integrated program, but always goes through the usual processing, always through the OFP, the operational focal point at the country. In the case of Mexico is at Hacienda, no? And under Brenda, and that's usually, and we as technical support, I always available for questions, discussions, you know, and it's important to have them as early as possible in the process, so we can have a speedy processing of any proposals. Thank you. Lisa, do you want to complement with anything that I have missed?
Maybe just briefly to add that what has happened with the past GEF replenishments is, you know, as the GEF 8 replenishment, you know, solidifies, and there's clarity that, you know, there will be a wildlife program moving forward. What we've done in the past is the GWP program steering committee, so this includes CITES Secretariat, has, you know, kind of collectively worked out, here's what the framework will look like for the next phase, and tried to do that early on in the GEF process, so then that can get out to all interested countries to say, okay, if you are interested, here's the process, here's the broader framework that you need to line up to, and what would happen. And just to answer Alejandro's question about project size, I think within the existing GWP, the smallest project would be 1.5 million STAR and Belize, and the largest one would be Mozambique, which is maybe 16 million. So there's a range of projects also. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that. There are even medium-sized projects, you know, the new ones we have in Belize and Panama are there, but we can have large projects, 20 million projects, depending on how the countries focus their strategy. For example, in South Africa, we have, I think, over 30 million on this for projects that South Africans have decided within their STAR allocation to dedicate to GWP projects. Something else that I want to add, just I remember when Lisa was speaking, and Camila, to your point about consumption, that's one of the pillars of the new strategy under GEF 8. We are seeking work more on the consumption countries as well, and also on behavior change. So there is this idea, and that's why I'm inviting you to take a look. I'm going to put the link in the chat on the GEF 8 document, where you find a complete description of the wildlife conservation for development integrated program, and that's a proposal. Okay, thank you.
If just to add one last bit of nuance, because the GEF is nothing if not a very nuanced organization. Please remember, when you look at the GEF 8 programming directions document, that was the first draft that was presented to the donors and replenishment participants in the first meeting. They have till the end of the month to give us comments, and we know we will get hundreds of pages of comments and requests. So consider what you see is very much a working draft, and that between now and July 1st, it will iterate and evolve according to participants' observations and requests. I think we can close here from our perspective to a certain degree. I think one of the take-home lessons or next steps for the collective group is to look at the current situation vis-a-vis the Vaquita, the current GEF project and what has been done, the current government budgetary allocations to the agencies that are in charge of the management of that resource, and start to formulate, the problem statement and the theory of change to achieve the objective that you want. Because there's been a recent baseline investment by the GEF, and I know many other parties are part of that effort. But I know some of the challenges have been the agencies responsible for management being sometimes short of resources and staff and fuel and things like that to enforce the solution that was identified in the existing GEF project. I think we've given you enough of a contextual framework of the possibilities for funding for you to reflect and think through what a next step might be. We welcome Brenda's recent appointment because we are in the last year of GEF 7, and so we're following up with all countries who have remaining resources to make sure they're on track to utilize all those resources in an efficient way that's in line with our GEF 7 strategies. So from our standpoint, we stand ready to answer any more questions over email. You have 3 good resource people here in Lisa, Adriana, and myself. And I will follow up with Brenda as the OFP at Hacienda, because there's a history that she's inheriting of discussions we've had with the government about the priorities for GEF 7 that we'd like to see reach a fruitful conclusion before June 30th, when those resources will no longer be available. So unless there's any other questions, I don't think anybody from the GEF GWP side have anything else, unless Lisa, do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Nope, nothing more to add.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for all that information. I do have a request on the floor from our Profepa, but let me just, before that, tell you that then I do think that we are on a very timely meeting now, because definitely want to see marine species included for GEF 8 portfolio for the Global Wildlife Program. And I'm very happy that our colleagues from the Ministry of Finance are in this call, so that they can reflect sort of those suggestions to that draft that you are talking about. And I mean, we can start thinking on how to better reflect the moment we are at. As you mentioned, Mark, this is a long-standing issue, and we do understand the complexity of it all. But now we are in the verge of losing an endangered species, and so that we must take actions on the ground that we are doing. And in that sense, I just wanted to share with you that we're, for example, presenting a project, a trilateral project with US and China on the consumption side of things. And so to make sure that the application of the law is enforced, and that we would also ask maybe the US and China to seek this opportunity within GEF context to sort of have a support going forward for these type of projects in the portfolio of GEF 8. So that I think that could help. But definitely we could start engaging on the technical part, on proposing a project going forward, and making sure that it is just not the vigilant part of it, but as you said, this is a more complex program, and that we also need to address the consumption side and behavioral changes and so on. So very happy to hear that you are now taking into consideration all of those aspects for the global welfare program going forward, and very happy to engage with our Ministry of Finance and our colleagues in the sector, because the programs that you have mentioned, Mark, are mostly envisioned by Conavio. But going forward for this, the Vaquita, Marina, and so on, there are several other institutions, particularly Profepa, which is the main how do you say, institution that is sort of pushing and coordinating our efforts. And so we would have I think a more large spectrum on what the project could be. But I will let Profepa mention this. They asked for the floor. Profepa, go ahead.
Thank you, Camila. I'm very glad that you mentioned the trilateral project with China and the US. We don't have to forget that if the Vaquita Marina is disappearing, it's because of the demand of the Totoaba, and the major region of demanding Totoaba is in Asia. So, well, we hope that this project will go forward, so we can stop this traffic. Well, I don't put the camera on. I'm sorry for this. I don't have any camera on my computer, and I try to connect with my phone, but I don't have a very good signal here. So sorry for that. The Deputy General Attorney for Legal Affairs just sent me a statement that she wants me to communicate to you. I am going to translate it into English at the moment, so please do not hesitate in interrupt if something is not clear enough. Well, this Office of the Attorney General considers that the donation of the resources of the Global Wildlife Program for $250,000, which is the initial amount that we talked about. I don't know if this will be the definitive amount. The resources can be focused according to the line of actions, mainly in the strengthening of surveillance actions, including network recovery activities. According to the analysis on the extraction of abandoned networks, the cost of removal of linear meter of the network amounts is around 1 million pesos. And in 2020, 28,947 meters were removed, which implied an outlay of 9 million pesos and a half, without considering the payment of salaries and per diem of the personnel involved. So taking into account what was exercised in 2020, it is considered for the current year application of a similar amount. The total cost of network rescue in 2020 representing the following. Well, I am not going to talk about all the amount of cost per meter of network maritime routes and land routes and so on. We said that the total amount was about 9.5 million pesos. And well, with an investment of $250,000, which is equivalent to 5 million pesos, more or less, the following actions could be carried out. So we would have maritime routes for around 4 million pesos, land routes for about 162,000 pesos, and tours with NGOs of around 1 million pesos, for a total of more or less 5 million pesos, which is the amount of 250,000 US dollars. So in consideration of Profepa, it is necessary that the donation in question be used in a greater percentage to strengthen surveillance actions, including network recovery activities, and in general, on the application enforcement of the environmental legislation. Since as indicated in the paragraph previously, these actions entail short-term results to accredit compliance action before the CITES General Secretariat. And finally, in relation to the response of CONAVIO, in which it indicates, considers the preparation of a study and the impact of the illegal capture of Totoaba and the ecosystem in order to establish different parameters that allow Profepa to determine the value of the damage translated into amounts. It should be noted that the said study was sent to this office on the 18th of October of 2019, concluded that it estimated that an assessment of the environmental damage caused to ecosystems by the capture of Totoaba is not practical and does not seem possible, suggesting that they be considered differential economic rewards according to the vulnerability of the species and the social condition and role of the person who committed the crime. And that's the end of the intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that information. As you see, we are allocating a lot of resources for the enforcement of the law and the protection of Vaquita Marina. And we're keen on developing a project going forward. So in that sense, Brenda from the Ministry of Finance, if you want to mention.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Camila. Well, I only wanted to echo what Camila already mentioned. We surely will incorporate Vaquita Marina and Totoaba as priority for Mexico on GEF 8. So we still have some resources for GEF 7, but I mean, I understand that it's not possible to include this project at the moment. But we look forward, Mark, for your communication, and we can have some meeting after to make some reallocation for these resources. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So that would be all of from our part.
Thank you very much, Camila, and thank you to Mark and the GEF colleagues, Adriana and Lisa, for this exchange. I think that that was the objective of this session, was to exchange information and ask questions, clarify issues. I think that you have the responses to your initial questions, and they have also questions from the GEF, which is important. I think that first I must say that CITES is a convention that is member-driven. The parties are driving here. And I understand it's the same for the GEF Secretariat. So Mexico is in the driving seat. You are the ones that decide which are your priorities, but there are questions on money for what, what happened to the money that we invested before, and there in certain organizations there may be even some fatigue that investing money, making meetings, and the vaquitas continue to decrease their populations. But my job is to give optimism and explore opportunities, because we are today and we need to act today and find solutions to the actual problem and to respond to the recommendations. So any support that we could provide and give to you and the GEF Secretariat to identify the key actions. And I think that you said clearly before, not today, but in the meeting that we had a few weeks ago, the money for removing the gill nets. That's the key activity, and we need more. There is the Totoaba season going on now, so this needs to happen now. The second activity that you mentioned is explore alternative livelihoods or a socioeconomic approach to address this issue with the fishermen. And the third one was science, if I remember well, what you were trying to implement to manage these protected areas and the species study, what is going on. So I think that in the project that you will prepare, these activities can be easily reflected. What Profepa is saying is that they have already the costing, how much it costs to remove X number of meters of these gill nets. But we are in a time where action is what we need to do. So the action is required, and for that we need money. But the financial institutions would like to understand better money for what, and what happened to the money that we gave you before, not to your government, but previous government, because this issue is coming from a long history, and you have questions on how to access these resources and what to do by when. I think that the GEF is one possibility. We need to continue to explore others, perhaps that have different formats, more flexible, depending on the opportunities. There may be other options as well, but this is a key one. And I think that what Adriana is playing, which is a great movement towards expanding the scope of the GWP to aquatic species, and also not only to the classic illegal wildlife trade approaches, but more to include livelihoods, to include demand reduction. Well, the demand reduction was already there, but more integral approaches to tackle the issue are a good opportunity for Mexico as well. So thank you again to the GEF and the World Bank. That I think this dialogue is very important for CITES as well. And when we can facilitate this, we'll be happy to do it. We are very glad to learn also that now you can undertake your bilaterals and are well prepared to discuss GEF 8. We will continue to explore options with you to see how we can support you between now and the GEF 8 to fill the gap, because as you say, the urgency is there, and also the obligations to report on results are there as well. So they cannot wait. So I hope that you all find this discussion, this dialogue useful. I hope that this will continue. We are your secretariat, so we are here to serve you, to assist you, to respond to your questions. The international community also have concerns, and they are asking questions, and I think that the fact that you are reporting may respond to these concerns that they have. But yeah, I think we have all a common shared interest here, which is the natural heritage of Mexico, and the Vaquitas, the Totoaba, the fishermen, the protected areas of the Alto Golfo are our key common objective. So I'm especially grateful with you, Maestra Camila Cepeda, because you have invested a lot of energy also on bringing all your institutions together and coordinating an approach from Mexico to have a dialogue as inclusive as possible. to find the solution. So thank you very much for that. And I pass the floor to you to close the meeting and have your final
Maybe
conclusions.
I could come in from the bank side, Mexico office perspective, also quickly.
Yes.
Just to say this after now having listened to this conversation and the diversity of issues that have been put forward, I would just like to encourage our Mexican counterparts, both in Relaciones Exteriores as well as in Hacienda, to, when you look forward to GF8 and thinking about defining a program and coming up with a more comprehensive approach to address this issue at hand, to really cast your net wide in the sense of what could be implementing agencies. Because even though, as we are here now represented also as World Bank Mexico office, what I see is really that this is a program that, notwithstanding its absolute merit and importance, the World Bank Mexico office would be not very likely to be able to take on, because it's neither geographically nor thematically directly aligned with our current country partnership strategy. Obviously, this is something that can always be discussed if Hacienda, which is the ministry that is basically providing our authorizing environment, should see this really as a topic that cooperation with the World Bank is being sought. But nonetheless, I really do encourage you, look at the different partners that you have that are already working on this topic, to be sure that you're getting the best equipped, best performing agency on that, as well as the agency that can move fastest with this agenda, because I do understand the urgency of this problem with the Vaquita, and as those of you who know the bank and know the bank's GF processes know that this is not going to be something where we can respond very quickly on. Thank you.
Thank you, Gregor. And perhaps before Maestra Camila close the meeting, I can mention that we are also working with the civil society on this, and they were invited to the previous meetings. There are small projects in San Felipe and in the area going on, where the civil society can play an important role also in helping the government with the implementation of some of these recommendations. Sometimes they are also very effective. So it's up to the government to see how they can engage and have these criteria indicators that Gregor mentioned to identify the best performing institution to deliver on the job in the manner that we all expect. Maestra Camila?
Thank you very much. And Gregor, nice to see you again, even if it's in the virtual format. I'm taking into consideration those recommendations. Definitely, we need to find an implementation agency that is already on the ground, and we can join other partners, as we all know that for every GEF projects we need co-financing and a myriad of actors to take on the project, so we can start thinking on whose partners we can collaborate with. Definitely we have a lot of homework, but we can start already on suggestions for the consultations going for GEF8, and start planning on a project of a large scale for marine species. But regardless of what we can do with this project, definitely Juan, I mean, we can keep exploring on other associations with CITES and with other partners. We want to explore all the international cooperation available for this issue, and looking forward on discussing more. I hope that you can get a look at the report that we delivered on Friday. I mean, all of the numeralia that Profepa was just mentioning is included in that report, and on the actions that we are doing, strategy going forward. So, I mean, there's quite a few options that we can think of for developing a project. So looking forward to keep on working on this issue.
Thank you very much for that. And my colleague Ben Van Redwood is looking at the report right now. Sorry, I said that you were closing, but perhaps you allow me to just ask my colleague Ben if he would like to say a few words also as the leading person on Vaquitas from the Secretariat and Totoaba. Ben, are you still there?
Yes, JC, thank you. And yeah, I would like to thank our Mexican colleagues who have very diligently been reporting against all the deadlines since COP. We very much appreciate that, and also appreciate the level of detail that you include in these reports. As Juan Carlos said, we are currently, or I'm currently working on the latest report, and as for the others, we will give you feedback once we've processed all of it. Yeah, the situation remains urgent, as Juan Carlos rightly pointed out, and it's evident that a lot of effort is being made, but it's also evident that there's quite a serious problem that continues. And so I think here persistence is extremely important, and it's excellent to see that you know, all kinds of possible solutions and opportunities are being explored to deal with this issue. Thank you very much, Juan Carlos. That's it.
Thank you very much, Ben. And just for you to know, we are starting the SC73 Standing Committee meeting tomorrow. It will be a 3 days meeting, but the Vaquita and Totoabas are not part of the agenda. So the next opportunity for the Standing Committee of CITES, which is the body overseeing the implementation of these decisions, will be the 74th meeting. And the dates are not yet decided. They will be discussed at the meeting that is starting tomorrow. So with that, we'd like to thank you all again. Sorry for having this meeting only in English this time. And thank you to la señora Procuradora de Profepa por asistir y por preparar la intervención en español para que fuera leída por su colega. Apreciamos mucho su participación. To the GEF, to the Global Wildlife Program, to my colleagues, thank you very much. And again, Maestra Cepeda, we are very grateful for your commitment, your engagement, and the involvement of all the agencies that are involved in the conservation and the fighting against the illegal wildlife trade in Totoabas, conservation of the Vaquita and the Totoabas. Thank you all. The presentation was shared, I think, by Adriana. Adriana, you say the presentation presented by Lisa, but otherwise we'll send you Maestra Cepeda a copy as well for you.
Yeah, we can definitely share the presentation. I also put in the chat the link to the program's website so that people can have more detail in the program. But we will share the presentation.
Thank you all, and we'll share this video as well as we did for the last one, for you to have that on the records and share with the relevant institutions that were unable to attend today. Thank you all for the time. Have a good rest of the day. Muchas gracias a todos y hasta la próxima.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Hasta luego.
Thank you, everyone.
Hasta luego.